You ever notice how the men women can't stop thinking about aren't always the flashiest or the ones trying the hardest? They're not the loudest in the room, not always the most good looking, and definitely not the ones chasing validation. What makes them magnetic is the way they speak, their tone, their calm, their boundaries, their reactions. Everything they say and everything they don't say carries meaning, and women feel that difference instantly. They can sense when a man is acting from fear and when he's acting from choice. There are certain lines, rare, powerful lines, that only this kind of man uses. Sentences that slice through manipulation, shut down emotional games, and tilt the dynamic without any aggression. If you've ever wondered why one guy is effortlessly pursued while another gets ignored, these lines are the reason. Learn them, and you stop chasing women. Women start chasing you. But before we break them down, you need to understand the foundation that makes them work. What truly separates the man a woman forgets from the man she keeps replaying in her mind isn't how hard he tries. It's his frame, his internal center, the way he holds himself, how he handles tension, and how he responds when he's tested. Everything starts with how he treats pursuit. Most men chase because they feel they must. The men women chase move with an entirely different energy. Which brings us to the first line, the one that flips the dynamic instantly. I don't chase what isn't mine. This sentence hits harder than any flirty line or compliment ever could. Women aren't drawn to a man who throws himself at them. They're drawn to a man with self-control, a man who doesn't hand out his attention like a discount coupon. The men women obsess over don't try to win them. They make women earn them. And that uncertainty awakens everything inside a woman, her desire, her curiosity, her pride, her instinct to prove herself. Most men never understand this. They reveal too much too soon. They talk endlessly, explain themselves constantly, and dump attention onto a woman before she's even decided whether she respects them. Imagine this. A guy meets a woman he finds beautiful. She's warm enough to keep the spark alive, but cool enough to keep him wondering. Instead of matching her pace, he panics. He pours attention on her like water on a fire he's afraid will burn out. Quick replies, long paragraphs, chasing clarity, chasing connection, chasing her. Every time she withdraws, he moves toward her. Every time she pauses, he fills the silence. Every time she slows down, he accelerates. And slowly, she stops seeing him as a prize. She sees him as someone who already decided she's above him. His desperation suffocates any attraction that was there. By the time he realizes it, she's gone. Women aren't confusing, they're responsive. They react not to a man's intentions, but to his emotional energy. Show her your attention is limitless, and she'll value none of it. Show her your presence has standards, and she adjusts instantly. That's what this line does. It isn't a threat. It isn't manipulation. It's a reminder that he isn't chasing anyone. He's choosing, observing, evaluating. That shift alone makes her pay attention. Suddenly, she feels what he used to feel. Suddenly, she's the one who doesn't want to lose him. The second line is just as powerful. That doesn't work on me. Every woman, whether consciously or not, tests the emotional strength of the man in front of her. She isn't doing it to be cruel. She does it because she wants to understand who he is under pressure. Is he easily moved, easily rattled, easily controlled? And the quickest way she finds out is through subtle emotional tension, a cold tone, delayed replies, a sudden withdrawal, a slight attitude shift, just enough to see if he'll collapse. Most men do. They scramble for reassurance. They apologize to fix discomfort. They over-explain, over-promise, or take responsibility for emotions that aren't theirs. In that moment, they expose everything: their fear of losing her, their dependence on her mood, their lack of grounding. Attraction dies quietly long before he even senses something is wrong. Now imagine the rare man who remains steady. She withdraws to provoke anxiety, but he doesn't bite. She gives him attitude, expecting a reaction, and he stays centered. When she tries to throw him off emotionally, he doesn't flinch, and when she pushes harder, he simply responds with calm certainty. That doesn't work on me. That one line freezes her. Not because he's being harsh, but because he sees her pattern. clearly, calmly, without judgment. Her old strategies don't move him. Her emotional waves don't sway him. And suddenly she's the one who has to recalibrate. Women don't respect men who react. They respect men who stay steady. This line isn't conflict, it's clarity. And once she realizes she can't control him, she starts wanting something she didn't expect: his approval. Then comes the third line: I think you need space. I'll let you take it. Nothing disarms a woman faster than a man who doesn't crumble when she pulls back. Most men panic at the slightest hint of distance. Their mind spirals, their confidence disappears, and they start chasing problems that may not even exist. That fear destroys their value instantly. Women sense it, and the dynamic shifts. But the rare man, the man with genuine confidence, responds differently. When she steps back, he gives her room. When she grows quiet, he doesn't force conversation. When she needs space, he doesn't cling. Instead, he offers it with calm certainty. That's when she realizes she's dealing with a man who won't lose himself trying to keep her. He becomes the one who waits instead of the one who panics. She becomes the one who wonders instead of the one who controls the pace. But there's a different kind of man entirely, the one who refuses to step onto that emotional seesaw in the first place. When a woman withdraws, he doesn't rush after her like most men do. He doesn't overthink, overreach, or attempt to soothe tension that isn't his to fix. He simply watches, measures her actions, and mirrors that distance with the same quiet confidence he had from the start. And instead of scrambling for clarity, he points out the truth she hoped he wouldn't notice. He meets her shift in energy with calm steadiness and says something she never expected. I think you need space. I'll let you take it. The effect is immediate. It rattles her. Because she anticipated pursuit, not neutrality. She counted on him to fill the gap, not step back and allow it to widen. She assumed he feared losing access to her. She didn't anticipate that he'd hand her the very freedom she thought would keep him off balance. His composed distance forces her to face something unfamiliar. This man isn't tied to her emotional waves. His sense of self doesn't rise or fall with her approval. He won't trade his dignity for closeness. He won't shrink, negotiate, or beg just to keep her attention a little longer. And that's what unravels her. Not the space itself, but how effortlessly he grants it. Women don't spiral because a man steps back. They spiral because he steps back without resentment, without anxiety, without bracing for impact. His calmness rewires the entire power dynamic. Suddenly, she's the one refreshing her notifications, replaying their conversations, wondering if she misjudged his interest or pushed too hard. The distance she once used as leverage now becomes the very thing motivating her to chase. His line isn't punishment, it's clarity. A man who can let her walk away becomes the man she can't get out of her mind. And that leads directly into the next truth. I want you, but I don't need you. Few lines shake a woman's ego as sharply as this, not because it's cruel, but because it slices through the illusion she's grown accustomed to. Many women expect interest to come with dependence. They expect a man's attraction to make him emotionally reliant. But the moment a woman senses that his desire has turned into need, her interest begins to fade. Neediness suffocates attraction. It reveals insecurity, emptiness, and the lack of a center. Picture a date with a man who's clearly mesmerized. She smiles and he overreacts. She pauses and he rushes to fill the silence. She mentions something trivial and he latches onto it as if it's a sign of destiny. Every gesture he makes begs for her approval. She sees it instantly. She labels him predictable, safe, and painfully replaceable. A man who needs her validation becomes a man she can manipulate without effort. Now imagine the opposite. She's stunning, confident, effortlessly captivating. Most men would crumble under that kind of beauty. But this man sits grounded, intentional, present. He listens fully but speaks with purpose. He lets silence breathe instead of choking it with nervous chatter. She tests him, pushes boundaries, flirts boldly, pulls back suddenly. He remains unshaken. And when the moment calls for honesty, he says it plainly, without hesitation or emotional tremor. I want you, but I don't need you. Her body reacts before her thoughts can form because that line exposes the paradox she's always been drawn to. He desires her, But his life doesn't orbit her. He chooses her, but not out of emptiness. He's connected, but not dependent. That balance is rare. It signals abundance, discipline, self-possession. It tells her she will have to match his energy, not exploit it. Women don't fantasize about being needed. They fantasize about being chosen by a man who stands strong with or without them. And that brings us to the next truth he lives by. My attention isn't free. You have to earn it. Every woman claims she wants a man who is always attentive, always available, always emotionally tuned in. But attraction doesn't work that way. People don't cherish what comes without effort. They cherish what requires investment. When a man floods a woman with unearned attention, quick replies, endless availability, dropped plans, he unintentionally signals that his time holds no value. And if his time holds no value, neither will he. You've seen it unfold countless times. A man meets someone he likes and immediately reshapes his entire schedule around her. He responds instantly, rearranges commitments, removes boundaries, and treats her interests like a lifeline. She doesn't lean in, she pulls away. Not because he's unworthy, but because he's positioned himself as a man without scarcity, without priorities, without standards. Then there's the other man, the one who treats his attention like currency. He engages deeply, but only when it's earned. He doesn't shower a woman with validation. He doesn't apologize for being selective. He doesn't perform like he's grateful for scraps. When she teases him for being mysterious or slow to respond, he doesn't justify or explain. He simply tells her the truth. My attention isn't free. You have to earn it. Those words flip her entire frame. Suddenly, she's not analyzing him from above. She's trying to qualify herself. Scarcity awakens desire. Earned attention creates obsession. And when a woman realizes she must rise to meet a man's standards, she begins investing emotionally, mentally, and romantically. This line isn't arrogance. It's respect for himself and for what he offers, which leads naturally to the next principle. I don't compete for women. Women compete for me. And when a man carries himself with that quiet certainty, the entire dynamic shifts without him raising his voice or lifting a finger, which is why the next moment in any connection becomes so crucial, because eventually, a woman will test whether his sense of worth is real or just an act. There's always a point where she subtly probes the foundation he stands on. She'll bring up men who message her, hint at attention she's receiving, or weave in comparisons designed to pull a reaction out of him. Not because she plans to act on any of it, but because she wants to see what kind of man she's dealing with. Will he crack? Will he try to prove he's better than faceless strangers? Will he get defensive, jealous, or insecure? Most men fall straight into that trap. They start pleading their case, trying to outperform shadows, desperately arguing why they deserve her more than someone she mentioned in passing. And the moment he does that, everything collapses. Without knowing it, he declares that she's above him, that he's auditioning, that he's competing for her approval. But the man who refuses to enter that contest communicates something entirely different. Imagine her mentioning another guy texting her, waiting for the tension to rise, expecting that small shift in his tone that reveals insecurity. But instead of reacting, he stays completely still inside himself. No jealous spike, no attempt to win, no fear. And when she presses, trying to draw something out of him, he answers with calm, grounded certainty. I don't compete for women. Women compete for me. In that instant, her frame breaks, not because he's being arrogant, but because he isn't playing by the script she's used to. Most men chase status in her eyes, trying to outrank every other guy she knows. She expects ego battles, emotional flare-ups, or at the very least some attempt to prove his worth. Instead, she meets a man who already knows his value, a man who doesn't operate from fear or scarcity, a man who refuses to fight imaginary rivals because he's too focused on what he brings to the table. His stillness exposes the game and resets the hierarchy in one breath. And that realization changes her. Suddenly, she's not thinking about other men. She's thinking about whether she measures up to the standard he carries so effortlessly. She begins competing with her own uncertainty, trying to earn her place in his world, not because he demanded it, but because he didn't need to. That internal shift creates a different kind of attraction, one rooted in respect, which leads directly into another truth she learns the moment she tries to test his limits. Every woman, no matter how emotionally mature, will eventually poke at a man's boundaries. She'll make a cutting joke, slip into a condescending tone, or deliver a small jab at his confidence, not to destroy him, but to see what he'll allow. She wants to understand the shape of his standards, whether he has them at all. Most men fail here. They laugh it off, pretend it didn't sting, or worse, apologize as though they're the ones who caused her disrespect. And without saying a word, they teach her that she can cross lines without consequence. Once she realizes that, respect erodes quietly, and where respect dies, attraction dies with it. But then there's the man who won't play that role. Imagine she throws a comment that goes just a little too far, expecting him to shrug it off. Instead, he meets her eyes with a controlled calm. No anger, no theatrics, no dramatic reaction. Just truth delivered with steady conviction. Disrespect me once, I'm gone. The silence that follows speaks louder than any argument ever could because she can feel that he means it completely. There's no threat in his voice, no posturing, no attempt to frighten or manipulate her. It's simply who he is, a man who protects his peace, a man who values himself enough to walk away the moment a line is crossed. And what shakes her isn't the sentence. It's the realization that he's done it before, and he'll do it again if he must. Women don't respect men who tolerate everything. They respect men who guard their dignity without needing to raise their voice. The moment she sees that his affection does not override his standards, she starts valuing him more than she ever intended. Because boundaries aren't walls. They're signals that he refuses to abandon himself for temporary closeness. And that brings everything to the sentence that hits deeper than almost anything else. I'd rather be alone than with the wrong woman. This is the quiet earthquake under her feet. Not loud, not emotional, just truth. Most men cling to relationships out of fear. Fear of loneliness, fear of starting over, fear of losing someone even when that someone isn't good for them. They'll endure inconsistency, disrespect, coldness, and emotional games just to avoid being alone. Women sense this dependency instantly, and when they sense it, the man loses his backbone. She becomes the evaluator. He becomes the one hoping. But picture her pulling back, giving him attitude, or trying to use distance to bend him toward her expectations. She assumes he'll correct himself, chase harder, prove he wants her. Yet instead of folding, he stays composed, anchored in who he is. And when she pushes him to choose between compromising himself or keeping her, he chooses neither. Instead, he gives her the truth with unwavering calm. I'd rather be alone than with the wrong woman. Everything inside her shifts because she now sees the man she cannot control, cannot guilt, cannot corner. A man who sees solitude as strength, not punishment. A man who isn't afraid of losing her because he refuses to lose himself. And that realization changes everything, for her and for the entire dynamic between them. Because once she senses that his center remains intact with or without her, a shift occurs beneath the surface. Suddenly, she isn't evaluating him from a place of power. She's evaluating herself through the mirror of his certainty. And if she can't rise to meet that standard, he doesn't cling. He doesn't beg. He simply steps back from the connection with the same quiet confidence he brought into it, not out of spite, but because a man who knows where he's going never allows someone else's chaos to steer his direction. Women don't chase the men who crumble at the slightest hint of distance. They chase the ones they could lose because those are the men who refuse to lose themselves. What follows is a truth most women never expect to encounter, and once they do, it stays with them. She either elevates herself to meet him, or she naturally fades from a story already moving forward without her. And that brings us to the moment every man eventually faces, the moment when tension thickens the air and the emotional landscape shifts. It's usually subtle at first. Her tone sharpens, her patience drops, her posture closes. She throws out accusations that don't match reality, or she retreats into silence that feels more like a strategy than a mood. Most men panic here. They rush to fix emotions that aren't theirs, apologize for things they never did, or mirror her intensity with frantic explanations. And without realizing it, they walk straight into an emotional maze she herself doesn't know how to exit. Because behind the raised voice, the cold shoulder, the sudden distance, there's something deeper: fear. Fear of losing a connection she cares about but doesn't know how to navigate. Fear of being abandoned first. Fear of being vulnerable enough to say what she actually feels. That fear doesn't come out softly. It comes out as pressure, defensiveness, overreaction, anything to avoid exposing the raw truth underneath. But then there's the man who doesn't get pulled into her storm. He doesn't react. He doesn't retreat. He doesn't try to win an argument or soothe an emotion he didn't create. He stays still, steady, grounded. He watches without judgment, listens beyond her words, and waits for the right moment. And when it arrives, he cuts through the noise with a clarity that dismantles everything she tried to hide. You feel cornered right now, don't you? The impact is immediate. Everything she built, every defense, every spike of emotion falls apart because he didn't respond to the performance. He responded to the truth beneath it. He didn't overpower her, and he didn't submit. He simply saw her. And women don't forget the men who see past their reactions into the vulnerability underneath. A man who can read emotional reality that clearly becomes someone she can't manipulate, confuse, or overpower, because he understands her more deeply than she understands her own defenses. And that level of perception begins to haunt her in the best way. But nothing separates men more clearly than the mindset behind the next revelation. The line that divides men who orbit around women from men who orbit around purpose. With or without you, I win. This isn't arrogance, it's direction. It's the difference between a man who uses a relationship to fill the emptiness in his life and a man who brings a full life to the relationship. Most men, even the well-meaning ones, drift into dependence. Their mood rises or falls based on her attention. Their ambitions stall when she withdraws. Their identity becomes tied to her approval, which means losing her feels like losing themselves. And while a woman might enjoy influencing a man's emotions, she never respects becoming the center of his world, because if he can't lead his own life, he can't lead anything. But then there's the man whose path doesn't bend for her moods, whose mission doesn't pause for her doubts. He's present, he's caring, he's grounded, but he doesn't abandon his direction to win her reassurance. She tests his resolve, trying to see if she can shift his priorities, if she can make his focus revolve around her, rather than around the future he's building. Yet no matter how she pushes, he remains unshaken. And when she challenges his commitment to his vision, he answers with calm certainty, "With or without you, I win." The room changes instantly. His presence expands instead of shrinking. Because she realizes this truth, he chooses her, but he does not need her. His life is moving either way. His purpose is alive with or without validation, and that independence has a gravitational pull she can't ignore. Women don't stay up at night thinking about the man who depended on them. They think about the man who stood firm, whether they stayed or walked. Because a man's words only carry weight when they rise from a place of genuine authority, emotional discipline, and internal strength. Most men imitate confidence without embodying it. They memorize lines instead of building the foundation that gives those lines power. But the phrases you've heard, the ones that shift dynamics, reframe relationships, and command respect, mean nothing unless they come from a man who refuses to negotiate his worth. Women don't fall for the loudest man, or the man who over-explains every emotion, or the man who becomes a sacrificial version of himself just to keep her close. They fall for the man who stays unbroken under pressure, who chooses himself before pleasing anyone else, and who sees solitude as an asset, not a threat. Because in a world full of men who try too hard, apologize too quickly, and give too much, the rarest and most unforgettable presence is the man who stands firm, calm, intentional, and untouchably grounded in who he is. And that kind of presence leaves an imprint she can't shake. It lingers in the back of her mind long after the connection fades, not because he asked to be remembered, but because a man who can walk away without breaking becomes the quiet standard she measures others against. That's why these lines matter. Not to control, not to manipulate, but to protect a man from losing himself in a world where it's far too easy to hand away your power. Each sentence is a lens, a way of seeing yourself clearly so you can recognize the women who match your strength and release the ones who don't. They anchor your emotional center instead of letting it drift with someone else's moods. And if you're listening now, it's because you're done stumbling through connections blind. You're done reacting to every emotional shift. You're done entering relationships with no sense of leverage or direction. Hidden Waters exists to give you the perspective women respond to but rarely admit. So if you're ready to stay ahead, ready to understand what actually drives desire, then lean in. Because the man who ignores this loses his edge, but the man who learns it becomes unforgettable. And once you step into that version of yourself, everything changes.